Sego Sewaguego, and welcome to another episode of FNTV 360. I'm your host, Regan Jacobs, and in studio today we have Sergio Pavone, our other host.
We're going to do a year in review. I think we have plenty to talk about.
Yes. There's a lot going on, and we picked a number of stories, almost tend to be not so accurate, but and in no particular order of importance. There was a lot of things that happened here in Kahnawake that affected, it seemed like, the region as a whole. A lot of the news that came out of Kahnawake this year that had made headlines across the country, actually, because there was a lot of stories where people were talking about them from all over, even in the United States. Some of the membership stories, for sure. We had Joe Norton running for Grand Chief again. We're going to look at the Murdered and Missing Women National Inquiry, the Save Our River campaign, which seemed to be a big one too. So let's get underway. Joe Norton's comeback.
Yeah, that was quite the surprise. Nobody was expecting it. It certainly shocked a lot of people, had a lot of heads shaking, and a lot of people wondering what was going to happen. I guess there was some kind of, I would say, a position void, or I think the position of the government of Quebec was a bit weak. Having agreed with the Mohawks to go ahead and do the transfer of the lands, and then being sued by the cities, the surrounding cities, there was sort of stalemate. Nothing was moving anymore. There was an agreement on the table. It was signed, and nothing was happening. So I guess Joe Norton appeared because they needed a little more aggressive approach, and I think that's what he was renowned for, and I guess that's what people were expecting.
I think so too. I mean, I think people were shocked, but they weren't shocked when he was nominated. There had been some discussion about his return to the Mohawk Council as the Grand Chief, that he had been out for almost 11 years and, had gone into private industry, gaming specifically, and then, with those ventures coming to an end, many people felt like, well, he's returning to politics. And, it's not out of the ordinary that politicians will be in politics, go into business, come back into politics. I mean, I think if you have it in your blood, you're always, as you probably...
You're telling me?
Yeah, you probably never really get that out of your system. So it wasn't a shocker. I think that with the three great candidates, you had Chief Lloyd Phillips, who sat on council for a number of years. Of course, our former Grand Chief, now Mike Zalil, who had held office for consecutive terms since Joe Norton had left, to be unseated by, Joe Norton upon his return, I think was maybe a shock to the community. But with the numbers being how they were, almost 100 over, I mean, I think that told us as community members here in Kahnawake that people really wanted change. So,
and I think
he came in with a storm.
Yeah, they wanted a stronger position. I think he delivered, because one of his first acts of Grand Chief was to go ahead and send some machinery on Highway 30 and start doing the work, and also by asking for a boycott of the businesses of the surrounding communities who had participated in the lawsuit that put a stop to the land transfer. So I think that was quite bold and quite rapid. I think a few weeks after his nomination, it was done. Yeah,
and he had talked about regulating the tobacco industry by the end of summer. I think that was something that was quick to say, but has been, historically has been very hard to do that, especially with all the stakeholders that are involved. So even though, I believe that he meant well, I think it was a big undertaking to do that. And now in 2016, we're still waiting for a lot of these things to unfold, including all of the things that are happening with Highway 30 that affect our region. So, I think he came in with good intentions, and he came in strong, and we're seeing some of that unfold now here into 2016, especially with some of the signs that went up on Highway 30, the digital signs. It's basically staking our claim, and I don't think that it's going to be be going away anytime soon. We're serious about, as a community, Kahnawake is serious about taking over that land, you know, and saying this is our land and we don't need your permission. So,
well, if one reads the documents, it's clear, and it's very well indicated all the way back to the priests that were there and the King of France at the time. It's black on white, very clear, and successively governments and officials have recognized that land as being Mohawk land.
right.
It's quite ironic that the priests that set up the whole land project were the ones that were selling it off piece by piece for ill-willed reasons. It's really history that keeps repeating itself, but if one reads the documents, they understand quite clearly, and that's why the government went that way.
I think that everybody knows. It's just a matter of how the local politicians in our surrounding communities choose to approach this subject. So we're not going to spend too much time rehashing everything. We're going to be sticking to 3-4 minutes of story if we can, because there's always a lot to say. So we're going to be moving on. Again, FNTV 360 Year in Review. I'm Regan Jacobs in studio with Sergio Pavone, and one of the top stories of 2015 was obviously Justin Trudeau being elected as Canada's new Prime Minister, and of course, you know, Stephen Harper. Over Stephen Harper leaving office. I mean, people were over him. They were fed up, but there was this big resurgence, if you will, of First Nations, you know, just really stepping up to the plate, wanting their voice to be heard. A lot of marches that had taken place in the downtown corridor, Ottawa, throughout the country, saying that we want change. It's time that you listen to us, and I think that he's delivered.
Yeah,
so far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good. I mean, naming a Minister of Native Affairs, a Native woman. Many of the nominations that he's done at minister levels have been associated directly with people who have pertinent reason to be there.
Right.
And that's fantastic. I mean, I don't know what's more incredible, that Justin Trudeau won the election or that Canada got rid of Stephen Harper. It's because
it's a tough call.
Yeah, if we go back, I think a lot of what happened in this election, there are some roots of the reaction of the population of Canada that are embedded in what was done in Idle No More. People don't realize that, but Idle No More was one of the first real fundamental objection movements to the government's position, saying, listen, that's enough now. It's enough with all this talking and fake crying in Parliament, saying that we're sorry when you say it but you don't mean it.
Yeah.
And they really stepped up, and we can say what we want with this movement. I got to tell you, it had a clear influence on Canada, Canadians, not only on First Nations, but it did shake the foundation. So I think we should, mention Idle No More in this this segment of Trudeau. It's not that he's directly linked to Idle No More,
right?
But there's that.
You have to think it may have an influence.
Yeah, certainly an influence there.
And you're right. I think one of the big things too that he did was looking at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the final report, and moving forward, which is a big thing for this country, especially for Indigenous people, and that healing and that journey that still has to take place. But also rescinding some of that legislation that was put in place. It almost seemed to eat away at the core of our sovereignty little by little, and it was so direct and so fierce that it really did seem like Stephen Harper had it out for First Nations, you know, and anyone who says differently is just, ignoring the plain truth of it.
Exactly, and I think like many states, there is a bit of abuse directly related to the fear of terrorism, where you modify legislation in order to protect. And I believe there's I forget sorry for this, but I forget which president of the United States said, but it was mentioned in history that when the people fear the government, that's democracy. But when when the government fears the people, it's democracy. When the people fear government, that's dictatorship.
Yeah.
And I think we were moving along that line where government, for the pretense of protecting people, they were removing their rights. The first people to be aimed are definitely First Nations who, claim things and take to the streets and say, hey, we've been done wrong and we want right to be done. They could have been, under that law, perceived as terrorists,
right,
and, bad influence or whatever. So it was important to move that way.
Right, and so I think Justin Trudeau, our another top story here that we're looking at for FNTV. So I mean, definitely a lot more to come on that subject. But don't go away. We're going to take a quick commercial break right here. You're watching FNTV 360. Stay tuned.
Solution Ford is more than just vehicles. It's an experience. Like any good dealership, we carry a wide variety of vehicles to suit your needs and budget. Come test out the new Ford F-150, Mustang, or any other vehicles on our lot that catches your eye. Come into Solution Ford today, and our experienced sales team will take good care of you. The Rail Coal-Fired Bistro is committed to offering top-quality menu selections for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, including an after-hours menu. The Rail Coal-Fired Bistro, located on Highway 138 in Kahnawake.
So moving right along, we're going to come back to more of a local story that hit national headlines too, was the Montreal sewer dump. There was a big Save Our River campaign here out of Kahnawake with people protesting at the foot of the Mercier Bridge for several weeks, it seemed. We had gone down there, FNTV, to do some news coverage and talk to the Save Our River campaigners, if you will. But one of the things was that the mayor of Montreal had announced 8 billion liters of raw sewage being dumped into the St. Lawrence River. And people were just like, this is ridiculous, So what do you know about this? I mean, there was a backage.
Yeah, well, the problem is that the infrastructure was way overdue, renovations and so on, and the renovation of it and the modernization of the whole sewer system required that they had to, diverge the actual sewage into the St. Lawrence because they had no place to put it while they were doing the renovations. So
it was just disgusting. I mean, some of the pictures that had come up earlier, you could see the foam, lining the river, and just raw sewage, literally nasty, condoms and toilet paper and tampons and all the nasty stuff that goes down into the toilet, obviously. So people were just disgusted, and obviously here in Kahnawake and other parts of the country, and it wasn't just specific to Indigenous people, even though we say we are the protectors of Mother Earth, which was the basis of the Save Our River campaign. But on a level of, just across the country, people who are interested in environment were just, disgusted. There had to be another way, but it only stalled it, and it actually did happen. It didn't take the entire week like everybody thought. It was done after several days, actually. So
they worked quite rapidly. I guess they felt the urgency of doing something really quickly, but it had to be done in the sense that there was no other alternative. They had looked at the possibility of storing it, but the quantity was just there's not enough tankers, in the world to just supply all that space, and they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the thing is, historical planning didn't provide for that, and it seems that sometimes,
which is a lot of the infrastructure around Montreal. Even we always talk about the Mercier Bridge not being sophisticated enough, structurally speaking, in this day and age, for the amount of traffic that goes from the South Shore to.
Exactly.
And all the bridges are going under. So
at the same time, in Brazil, there's a dam that broke and did way much more damage. And if you look at what happened in the Gulf of Mexico with the BP situation, so there are disasters. This was not quite a disaster. It was more like a planned disaster. But
it wasn't like a natural.
It had to be done. The specialists came around to the conclusion that that was the only solution possible.
Right. All right. Well, it stinks.
Yes.
Okay, so moving on, and then the national inquiry into murdered and missing Native women is a big step in the right direction, as you had wrote in your notes. A diagnostic of Canadian society will most certainly come from this inquiry.
Yeah,
a lot of things happened with this, including I noticed that you put something about Val d'Or here. Do you want to just talk about that?
I think it falls into place. I think Val d'Or is also big news here for the province of Quebec. I think it's important for all First Nations across the world because it shows the abuse of power, allegedly, but nonetheless, the potential of abuse of power. And it always touches the same segments of First Nation societies, but all societies in general. It's always the children and the women that are first attacked because they are the first to be led into poverty by social and systemic systems. So
there was a big, and just for some of our viewers who, just to refresh your memory, there was a report that was released by Radio Canada. They had revealed the big story that police were allegedly abusing their power up in Val d'Or. There was a number of Indigenous women in the community, a large number of women and their family that had come forward to talk about some of this abuse. Some of them had even talked about, being brought out into the more remote portions of the territory and left there with no shoes on and things like that were just disgusting to hear about that allegedly involved law enforcement.
And that's why it sort of brings us back to the missing and murdered women, in the sense that the way they were brought out or allegedly brought out of Val d'Or and far away from the community, it's a little the way, that's how you don't find the women. If they're missing or murder or both, it's because they were brought far away from the general public. And it's always the same pattern. It's these women who are fleeing from turmoil in their own community for many reasons and end up in these centers, and they have no other alternative but to turn to acts of prostitution or what have you, and then to forget about the pain while they fall into alcoholism. So it's a cycle that I believe in the inquiry that Canada is going to be doing, we're going to see this systemic problem, and we're going to see the diagnostic that's going to come out. And I think Canada needs to solve this illness that we have. And
I think Justin Trudeau and his cabinet, when they announced that the national inquiry was going to be moving forward, and now in 2016, I know that meetings have already begun. But I just think it was such a great reflection of the country, simply because there was a call for a national inquiry when Stephen Harper was in power, and he didn't think that it was important enough, as big of an issue enough, and I thought that was interesting, because I think everybody knew that it was going to uncover some issues with policing in this country and abuse of power and authority, and I think we're all on the same page that this is the beginning of many of other reports that are going to be coming forward. And I don't think they really wanted to deal with that can of worms, because then people can turn around and say, we told you, we knew this was going on, and it was just another thing for you not to listen to us,
Well, I think it's the diagnostic is going to show, they're going to touch things as fundamental as education, poverty, and that goes directly to job opportunities. And then that links you directly to how First Nations are where they are. Most of them, we tend to think here in our region, we tend to think that First Nations are all like Ganawagi.
Right.
But that's not the case. It's not always, First Nations are not always, in urban areas. Most of First Nations are in very rural and very far away areas, which they were mostly moved there because industry needed the other lands that were prosperous for them. So that's pretty much the diagnostic, I think, that we're going to see coming out of this. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this commercial break on FNTV 360.
Solution Mazda, located in Chateauguay, Quebec, is the #1 destination to find that perfect vehicle for you at an unbeatable price. We have a wide variety of vehicles such as the CX-3 and the Mazda 2, 3, and other top models. Solution Mazda offering the best selection of new and used vehicles at an unbeatable price. Solution Mazda, we look forward to serving you.
Dr. Nguyen delivers complete dental care in a state-of-the-art facility with a gentle and friendly environment. Providing a personalized treatment approach for your entire family, Dr. Nguyen specializes in braces for both children and adults. Open day and evening, Dr. Nguyen is conveniently located in Chateauguay at 185 St. Jean-Baptiste. For a smile that will last a lifetime, book your free consultation today.
Solution Ford's Liquidation Center in Chateauguay is the location to find an exceptional selection of used vehicles. All of our vehicles have been inspected by professional technicians to ensure you have the highest quality and best price. We carry vehicles from Ford, Nissan, Toyota, Audi, and more. Solution Ford's Liquidation Center. When you purchase a vehicle from our lot, you're putting yourself in good hands.
So, of course, we're going to be moving on locally here in Kahnawake and the region. Of course, this is again another story that had made national headlines. Evictions and a number of protests take place here in Kahnawake. Membership issues, especially, have been in the last 2 years have been more prominent in the community, but that culminated to a number of community protests through the streets of Kahnawake with people saying, you know, if you marry out, stay out. And that culminated to a march to local residents' home that was vandalized the night before. Now, you know, people aren't saying, or the police weren't saying that it was a direct connection, but given the fact that it happened the night before, and then there was this protest. There's just allegations that there was some connection, but that, I mean, obviously can't be proven. A lot of the people that were, and I was there that day, I went over to the family member's home and spoke to them, and then I spoke to a number of protesters that were on the street, and they were doing a peaceful protest. They were out, you know, across the street. They said that, you know, they didn't think that the vandalism to the vehicles in the home was appropriate. A majority of the people there were pretty disgusted, actually, but they were staunch in their position that you've married out after the moratorium of 1981. You knew that, you know, this community does not want to see non-natives living here in Kahnawake, and so that was the basis and the foundation of this march. And, you know, and again, there's two sides to every story. Not everyone agrees with it. The family had a number of people in the community that supported them against this type of action. So, you know, there was a lot of debates going on if this is the right course of action. People can be very adamant in Kahnawake, for sure. They're spirited, maybe the word, when it comes to things that they believe in. So we try to report on two sides of the story all the time. And it's definitely difficult being that reporter when you know that, you know, you're here to tell a story, but it's such an emotional story, and you try really not to become invested or take sides of, you know, and I think we've done a fantastic job of just reporting the facts. But one of the things that I found interesting is, what is the mindset of people who are watching this story or reading this story outside of Kahnawake? Like, you know, obviously you're not from the community, but what is that? What
I get from
those thoughts?
Well, there's, you know, again, there's two sides of the story. There are the people who are informed and the people who are not informed. And the people who are not informed are going to say that this is racist, that this is unjust, and it's terrible what's going on in Kahnawake. That's what you get from uninformed people. But then you have the information that's out there, and a lot of people do try to find it. And, you know, with respect to historical movements of peoples and territories, and with respect to, you know, what was going on before the arrival of the French and all the colonizers.
Right. I mean, this isn't something new.
No,
it's been
not.
an issue, a heavy issue, since the 70s, especially here in Kahnawake. So,
but anchored into what we recently know as recorded history of the colonizers. It goes right into line with the land claim. It's that you have the first people who came here that were more Francophone, Mohawks, more Francophone and Catholic, and then the second movement were the Anglophone that were not necessarily Catholics, which created this community. And in the text of the law that was written by the King of France at the time is specifically written that this is for and uniquely for the usage of Mohawks.
Right. Well,
So
I mean, they obviously, yeah, and they had a motive for that too. And there's always motives, you know, in terms of corporate industry or, you know, interests in our lands and why and things like that. So I mean, obviously this filters down into the community and the way that people think and feel, you know, about this type of issues with membership. So it's so deep rooted. Yeah. But they was definitely a story that made headlines in 2015. Moving on, more at a national level now again. The departure of Nathalie Simon from the position. Well, this is more regional. Sorry, you wanted to talk a little bit about the MRC and Nathalie Simon, and this was a big thing in this.
Well,
in this region.
I felt I thought I could have perceived the possibility of having some kind of movement or change of opinion or strategy on the part of the MRC, seeing that Nathalie Simon, which is also the mayor of Chateauguay, that stepped down from position of prefect or president or chairperson of the MRC, the regional body. But when asked about the philosophy and the approach, they all answered unanimously that they would maintain the lawsuit and they would maintain their position. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. You know, if you're going to change leadership, you're going to change, you know, some kind of direction.
Right.
And I don't see why, you know, you're changing, you know, Queen of Spades for a Queen of Hearts. I don't see the difference, but anyway, in this case, anyway.
Yeah.
Let's see what, you know, future will bring. But of course, a lot of good words came out of that meeting where they told the people present that they had good intentions, that they wanted to sit down with Kahnawake, but apparently it was about a year down the road and they hadn't sat down yet with Joe Norton to talk about anything, yet they were having meetings with ministers. So, and that's quite odd also, because usually the government does not have any meetings with anybody if they're being sued, because they don't want to affect the lawsuit. So there's something going on there that I really like to clarify.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that when we had you know, discussed this issue, well, you had discussed this issue with Grand Chief Joe Norton, that he had said, you know, they in a roundabout way invited them, you know, to discuss things, but it felt more like a threat. And, you know, he talked about Couillard and the lack of discussion that he's had with Kahnawake, but now it seems like there were some few things that came out of that, and I like to think that we had a role to play in some of our coverage and helping to force that meeting, because it didn't seem like any other media was really covering it but us.
That's right.
And I think it kind of set a spark, you know, to the Mohawk Council to say, hey, they are doing these things, they are holding these kind of meetings, how come we're not involved in the MRC, why is that? And then now in 2016 he is meeting with Couillard to talk about this Highway 30. But there was, you know, and just to end this very quickly, because I know we're dealing with time issues here, but you know, at the end of 2015, there was this very backhanded deal that had gone on that was announced in
our coverage.
They had talked about it in Congress, how there was some legislation that was being put forth for those very lands on Highway 30. So, you know, there was a big reaction here in Kahnawake saying, no way.
I think to wrap it up, I think it's really particular that, you know, the people perceive the boycott that Joe Norton called for as something negative and an aggression to the other communities, but nobody has seen the lawsuit against the government of Quebec and the blocking of the process of transfer of lands as an aggression to Kahnawake. No one has covered it that way. Everybody said, the municipalities have a right to do this, it's great. Nobody ever mentioned the fact that initially there's an agreement between the government of Canada, the province of Quebec, and MCK for the transfer of the lands, which is in a way, and direct way, fundamentally legal.
Right, yeah.
Nobody says, oh, they're going against something that's fundamentally legal.
Yeah.
It's
and fighting over land that's already Kanewage's. Anyways,
exactly.
Okay. So moving on, something I meant to do national, went regional, went right into this story, but I skipped, the 25th anniversary of the ochre crisis, which was more of a national, regional thing. But the reason I say that too, nationally speaking, is that it wasn't just here in this region. It was a regional story. It made national headlines. It made international headlines. And 25 years later, there was some talk about where have we come? How far have we come in 25 years? And some of the people that, from Kanewage and Kanesadage that were involved in this 25 years ago, they talked about that evolution of time and the stories and where are people now. And when you look at things from a political standpoint, there is a lot of First Nations and Indigenous communities across Canada that are saying no more. But it almost feels like the government quite hasn't learned its lesson, or even our regional governments, and that's not to I'm calling people out, I guess. It's not to put people down, but even with regards to Highway 30, you know what I mean? There was Caledonia. There was right now Akwesasne is going through these things where there's Kanesadage. There was talk again about some sort of development, and so when I just am interested in knowing, like, when an Indigenous community is under land claims and these surrounding communities are understanding this, but yet they don't take the proper protocol or even process that identifies this emotional tie that the community has to this land. It's like, well, we know we can make money off of it. It comes down to industry, and I think it's kind of sickening sometimes.
It's the contradiction that really gets me, is the contradiction between, and we saw it at the MRC meeting when we covered it, is the contradiction between saying, oh, we have nothing against the Mohawks. This is all about, the problem we have with a level of government that isn't respecting us as a municipality. Okay, having said that, you do realize that the lawsuit automatically blocks the transfer of lands that already belong to the Mohawks.
Yeah.
But no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
We're not mean people. It's a little bit like DiCaprio said, we have to start respecting and acknowledging First Nations all over the world. We hear all the nice talk all the time. Everybody loves First Nations. Yeah, the talk is talk. Let's see the walk. And the walk stops short. It's like hours short of the door. You're just on the verge of entering the home, and it's like, yeah, we like you, but gee, stay on the porch, please.
Yeah.
And that's
and I think maybe that's where we're at, right? 25 years after the ochre crisis, because that was a big one here in Canada. Okay, so moving on. We're going to kick the show with, obviously, Mohawks Represent, and that's the first World Indigenous Games. I guess we can end on something a little light.
Yes.
Bringing home the gold in soccer. So this was a really big story. Soccer players, young women from Kanewage, British Columbia, part of the Haudenosaunee community. So I think there was Akwesasne and Six Nations and Kanesadage that had played, and the rest were from BC. But they had gone out to play at the first World Indigenous Games that were held in Brazil, and they went all the way to the top and won the gold medal.
Yes.
I think that's a great story. It's not too political.
Well, it's great news, and I'm really glad because it was my first coverage with First Nations
We sent
TV.
you out to meet them at the airport.
That's right.
And I think that was fun because, as the former mayor of Chateauguay and someone who everybody knows you're pretty entrenched in politics still, even, more from a personal standpoint, obviously, it was like, hey, go cover this this lighthearted girl story, and, it
was lovely. Well, it was
and
great
you rose
to learn.
to the occasion,
It was nice to learn that they've, they had the experience of playing with some players that had never worn worn cleats before, no uniforms, and you can see that, you know, First Nations from around the world arrived with their own culture.
Right.
They were exposed to all kinds of different foods, but they all realized that they had this one thing in common. They would all get together and chant together, and they would all have their spiritual moments, and they had that in common. It was great cultural experience too, and I was really glad to learn about all that stuff.
Yeah, it was a great story, and we do that to you sometimes.
Yeah.
We just kind of say, here, go cover this story, and it has nothing to do with what normally you're used to.
That's right.
But people are getting used to you around here.
That's
more
right.
so like that, right? So we're going to be doing a lot here with our show in 2016, including an idea that we came up with for a cultural challenge. We'll just keep you on the seat of your pants, I mean, or the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
That didn't sound right. But we came up with some really good ideas. Then when we were talking about the 2015 year in review, there was just so many things to choose from. You know, I think when every media outlet goes into this, it must be just one of those things like, what's the, you know, what are the biggest? And I don't think, you know, we would be too far off from some of the mainstream and even some of our local coverage. So with that, any last thoughts on heading into 2016?
Well, I think we're going to be following the news and all the events in cultural and sports, but certainly the political aspect, because it runs our lives, and we're going to be looking for a lot of action and less talk.
Yeah, and this is only our second show, so FNTV 360 is meant to take a look at regional, local, and national headlines that are happening in the Indian country here in Canada. But it doesn't mean that we don't cover the Haudenosaunee communities too, or any other community that's making some big waves across the country and in the United States. So it's a big undertaking, but I think we're up for the challenge. And if you want to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can also hit up our website, firstnationstv.com. We're constantly updating that. We report things locally and, of course, in our region. So with that, we hope you enjoyed the program, and if you have any comments or questions, you can email us at info@firstnationstv.com. So I'm your host, Regan Jacobs.
And I'm Sergio Pavone, bidding you farewell. Salut bien.
Anna.